Hello and welcome to another session on criticism and theory. Let's begin a new essay, Tradition and Individual Talents by T.S. Eliot. Now, T.S. Eliot's critical works mostly consist of essays and lectures written or delivered from time to time and collected together in book form later on. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948. The most important of the books that were collected and made into book form are The Sacred Wood, Essay on Poetry and Criticism, which is published in 1920, Homage to John Dryden, published in 1924, for Lancelot Andrewes, Essays on Style and Order, published in 1928, Selected Essays, The Use of Poetry and Use of Criticism in 1935, Elizabethan Essays and Essays, Ancient and Modern. Eliot stands for orderliness both in art and in criticism, each striving for the other. That is, art seeks criticism in life and criticism seeks art. And hence each, that is criticism and art, must be orderly. But Eliot is not happy with criticism. He finds it, to quote him, quote, "no better than a Sunday park of contending and contentious orators who have not even arrived at the articulation of their differences," unquote. English criticism has always been divided into classicism and romanticism. Classicism always follows the principle of allegiance to an outside authority, but romanticism follows individual liberty, and the very nature of love for liberty is very much ingrained in English character itself, and therefore classicism has no standing in England. The Romantic period has revolted against it, and a new trend of liberty has come up. This, says Eliot, makes the choice between these two modes of writing a national and a racial issue. Eliot answers to this confusion, and he says that, in his opinion, the right approach to criticism is the classical approach. Men, he says, cannot get on without giving allegiance to something outside themselves, unquote. As the citizen has to give it to his government, the believers to the church, so the critic has to give it to some common criterion of righteousness. So certainly we can see that Eliot is revolting against the romantic ideals of liberty. Romanticism did not want to depend on anything outside their particular country, and not just that, they were all in praise for individualism. They loved liberty and they felt good about it, and they did not turn to their predecessors or the ancients. They only turned to a particular predecessors and not everyone. They loved liberty and individualism, and therefore here you will find Eliot speaking or going against. It's indeed he is questioning romanticism. Those who stand for individual liberty in art, what happens to them is that they listen to their inner voice only. With no other guide than their inner voice, they seek to interpret an author or his work according to their understanding. But how would an author, but how would he know whether his interpretations are correct or not? There is no external evidence to confirm it because he does not go outside. He only believes in his self, his inner self. The result often is that instead of facts, instead of getting proper evidence, or instead of getting proper information or facts about the author or about the work that he is dealing with, the critic is supplied with his own opinion or fancy, which can lead to a kind of misjudgment. Thus, the major goal of criticism is not creating one's own opinion but fact finding. Okay, it cannot be based on mere interpretation alone, and this can happen, or you can only find facts or correct information only if you look, or only if he tries to find something outside himself, that is outside his own mind or outside his own interpretation. And that will act as a guide. The outside allegiance will act as a guide. That is, T.S. Eliot asks to return to the predecessors and their valuable works to understand and keep them as our guide to interpreting and finding insight better. That is, he wants them to go back to the classicist, but again not fully supporting the classicist either, the neoclassicists either, the neoclassicists. He wants them, it's not about neoclassicists, but it's all about the classicists. He wants them to go back to the classicists. Of course, he is for the neoclassicist and he is questioning the romantic ideals. He says that a critic must also be objective in nature. He follows his favorite Matthew Arnold. To be able to put his finger right at the facts about a work, he must have a highly developed sense of fact. That's what T.S. Eliot says. You have to have a good account, or you have to have a highly developed sense of fact to put your finger right at that work. And second thing that he says is that he should use the tools of comparison and analysis. He must see how the work modifies the past tradition and is itself modified by it. Now this is very important, which you will have to bear in mind. How does a poet or a critic use the tool of comparison and analysis? He will have to see how a work of the past is helping a new work of the contemporary period. At the same time, how this new contemporary period's work, whichever work it be, is reshaping and modifying our thoughts and our analysis of the past work. Okay, this is a very important point. We will be dealing with that later. So, T.S. Eliot wanted a change in the attitude of criticism. That's what I was trying to tell you all this while. He was not happy with criticism. The attitude of criticism existing in that period, or during that period, during his period. And that is why we say T.S. Eliot, as a critic, he is rebellious. And as a poet, he is revolutionary, because why? He has experimented and brought in a revolution in literature. His Wasteland, for instance. His pronouncements and criticism is a towering process. According to him, no poet or artist makes his complete meaning alone. What does this mean? It means that no man is an island. The moment you start writing or painting or writing a drama or anything, any work of art, you are connected. You cannot make meaning in a vacuum. You are surrounded by an environment. Without this environment, you cannot make any sense to your work. So when you paint, you are surrounded by an environment of past painters, your present and contemporary paintings and painters, their style and also the past style. So it is this environment that helps you function or paint naturally. You learn from the paintings of great painters, the strokes, the brush strokes, the style, the color combination, and then you build your style on it. And then you bring your style, artistic style of painting, your individual style of painting, but again you are dependent on that past environment. So as an artist, you are not in isolation, you are connected with the past, you are connected with the past tradition, you are connected with your predecessors. Again, if it is a film direction or a cinematography, your movies are not out of the vacuum. You build on what is already existing, creating a new style which could be different from the past. But even then you are connected with the past, its techniques, because it is on this that you modify the existing. Another thing that Eliot speaks of is criticism. Where should criticism be directed? Honest criticism or sensitive criticism are not directed upon the poet but upon poetry. This is the first time a critic has said this. Now his theories are very important. His theories are seminal because they lead to the advent of new criticism. In fact, it was with his criticism or critical ideas that you have the present day, present century string of theories or array of theories. T.S. Eliot was unhappy with the existing situation of criticism. Then I told you that in the beginning itself. He was very unhappy with that disorderliness. There was only two types, classicism versus romanticism. And romantic ideals were given, or they revolted against the neoclassical period, and they brought in a change, and that change existed for several centuries, and that brought in a love for liberty among these English people. Liberty or freedom or individualism. But then T.S. Eliot questions this sort of individualism. He says that you are not in a no man's island. Whatever you are writing, whichever art or whichever work that you are in, it is a product of the past. It is a continuation of the past. And you cannot isolate yourself and say that you have created something out of the blue, out of nowhere. You can't create anything out of nowhere, right? You are connected with that environment, whichever environment it be. Okay, so T.S. Eliot was, and another thing, he was very, very unhappy with the criticism of that period. That's why I said he is rebellious. When a person is unhappy, he desires changes. When he changes the situation, he becomes rebellious. Till then, the attention of the critic was directed to the poet. It was all, the critics were all towards the poet and not the poet and not his work. It was all directed to the poet or the artist. Now there is a total change, an about turn. Now the criticism is not on the poet but the poetry. The essay Tradition and Individual Talents was published in 1919, and which came, of course, in his collection of essays and criticism, The Sacred Wood. This essay created a drastic change. To some, it brought heartburns. They did not like it. And to some, solace, as though they were waiting for it. This essay is considered as an unofficial manifesto of T.S. Eliot's critical creed and appeared in Times Literary Supplement. This essay also forms the basis of all his subsequent criticisms. Now, if you look at the essay Tradition and Individual Talents, this essay is divided into three parts. The first part deals with the concept of tradition, the second part deals with the theory of impersonality of poetry, and the third part sums up the whole discussion. Okay. So let's begin. Let's first try to understand Eliot's concept of tradition. According to Eliot, tradition is not the slavish imitation of the past. It is not just a mere imitation. Like a slave, you are imitating the past. No, that is not tradition. It cannot be inherited. Tradition cannot be inherited. It can only be attained through hard labor, through hard work. Above all, one must have a historical sense to understand and attain tradition. Now, what is this historical sense? Historical sense involves the perception not only of the pastness of the past but also its presence. Don't worry, we will take all this and we'll break it down one by one. Okay, so one who has the historical sense feels that whole of literature of Europe, or one who has this historical sense must understand the whole of literature of Europe from Homer to the present day, including the literature of his own country and its tradition. Let me explain this. Let me break it down for you and explain this. First, let's start with tradition, what we discussed. Usually, when we associate the term tradition with a poet, we use it rather derogatively, rather negatively. For example, when you have a person, he or she dresses in a very traditional manner, very conventional manner. He or she, ഇപ്പോൾ മുടിയിൽ എണ്ണയൊക്കെ തേച്ച് ആൺകുട്ടികളാണെങ്കിൽ മുണ്ടൊക്കെ കൊടുത്ത് ഒരു ഗ്രാമത്തിൽ നിന്നും വരുന്ന ആൾക്കാരൊക്കെ ആണെങ്കിൽ മുണ്ടൊടുത്ത് തലയിൽ എണ്ണയൊക്കെ തേച്ച് വളരെ ട്രഡീഷണലായിട്ട് നടക്കുന്ന കുറിയൊക്കെ തൊട്ട് നടക്കുന്ന ആൾക്കാരെ നോക്കിയിട്ട് മിക്കപ്പോഴും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പെൺകുട്ടികളാണെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ വളരെ ട്രഡീഷണലായിട്ട് ഡ്രസ്സ് ചെയ്ത് വരുന്ന കുട്ടികളെയൊക്കെ ചില കുട്ടികൾ കളിയാക്കാറുണ്ട്. മോഡേൺ ആയിട്ടുള്ള കുട്ടികൾ, അയ്യേ അവൾ ഭയങ്കര പഴഞ്ചനാണ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവൻ ഭയങ്കര പഴഞ്ചനാണ്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ അത് ഡ്രസ്സിങ്ങിൽ പിന്നെ വളരെ അങ്ങനത്തെ സ്റ്റൈലും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ചിന്താഗതിയും അങ്ങനത്തെ ആണെങ്കിൽ അതൊരു പഴഞ്ചൻ ചിന്താഗതിക്കാരനാണ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് കളിയാക്കാറുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ അതിനെയാണ് നമ്മൾ കൂടുതലും ട്രഡീഷനെ അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു വാക്ക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ ഒരു ട്രഡീഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ വാക്കിന് അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ഡെറഗേറ്ററി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു നെഗറ്റീവ് ടേം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആയിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ യൂസ് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. വി യൂസ് ഇറ്റ് ടു ക്രിട്ടിസൈസ്. അതൊരു പോയട്രിയിലാണെങ്കിൽ, ഒരു കവിത എഴുതുന്നതിലാണെങ്കിൽ പഴയ തരത്തിൽ പണ്ടത്തെ ആൾക്കാർ എഴുതുന്ന പോലത്തെ വാക്കുകളും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പണ്ടത്തെ ആൾക്കാർ എഴുതുന്ന പോലത്തെ വാക്കല്ല, പണ്ടത്തെ പഴയ വാക്കുകളൊക്കെ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് ഇഫ് യു യൂസ് ആർക്കൈക് ടേംസ്, the medieval terms, the old English or the old Malayalam. I don't mean the old English or the old English as of the olden times, that is the Celtic times. I mean perhaps the language used by Shakespeare or the language used by the poets of the past, or the style that is used by the poets of the past, or they are pertaining to the rules and regulations as given by the classicists, then they call or they criticize that person, that poet, as being very traditional. He does not have any individuality. He always goes by the conventions of poetry. It was a kind of a fashion to break the conventions of poetry, or to break old conventions and old norms, and to bring a new style of poetry was given more importance. So this was a term which was used rather derogatively, and we use it to criticize a poet. That is, he is too traditional or too conventional. That is, he follows the old system of rules set by poetry, or rather he imitates his predecessors. And we consider it to be a negative point of a writer or a poet. But according to T.S. Eliot, that is not true. His idea of tradition is very wide. It is not this sort of tradition. His idea of tradition is very much different. In fact, he was offended by some of the individual liberty that the Romantics indulged in, and he was critiquing it. Tradition, according to Eliot, is not just following or imitating dogmas or rules or the customs of a given culture. It is much more than that. It is much like the ethos of the age, that is, right from the sacred, say, rituals of religion to how a person greets a stranger in a given culture. Starting from how നമ്മുടെ റിച്വൽസ്, നമ്മുടെ റിലീജിയനിലുള്ള പല പല റിച്വൽസ് അതേപോലെ തന്നെ നമ്മളൊരു സ്ട്രേഞ്ചറിനെ ഗ്രീറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നവരെയും ഒരു കൾച്ചറിൻ്റെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ട്രഡീഷൻ്റെ ഭാഗം എന്ന് തന്നെ പറയാം. സോ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് വാട്ട് ഇസ് ട്രഡീഷൻ? ട്രഡീഷൻ ഇസ് എ ടു ഇസെഡ്, അല്ലേ? എ ടു ഇസെഡ് ദ കംപ്ലീറ്റ്നെസ് ഓഫ് ലൈഫ് ഓഫ് എ ഗിവൻ കൾച്ചറാണ് ട്രഡീഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഒരു കൾച്ചറിൻ്റെ ഒരു കംപ്ലീറ്റ്നെസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എ ടു ഇസെഡ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, റൈറ്റ് ഫ്രം ദ റിച്വൽസ് ഓഫ് റിലിജിയൻ ടു ഹൗ എ പേഴ്സൺ ഗ്രീറ്റ്സ് ദ സ്ട്രേഞ്ചർ, ഹൗ യു സം ഓഫ് us we do not wear footwear inside the house, we wash our legs before we getting into the house. These are all a part of culture which becomes a tradition. അപ്പോൾ ഇത് എ ടു ഇസെഡ് ഓഫ് the culture that we are in, and it becomes a tradition. So what is a tradition? Tradition is the completeness of life or of the life of a given culture. That is his idea of tradition. That is what, or this is the tradition that T.S. Eliot is speaking about, the completeness. Okay, so this is, I just gave this as an example. Now let's bring this tradition and culture into literature. Remember, since Eliot was writing from Europe, what he had in mind was Europe, the whole of Europe. So he was Eurocentric. Okay, so he was mainly speaking about the Western culture. He was speaking about the literature. Since he's speaking about criticism and literary theory and literature, it is all about literature and culture, literature and theory and tradition. The example that I gave you was, I just wanted to tell you that it is completeness, the A to Z. Okay. So here it is about literature, so it means A to Z of literature. The whole thing about literature, whole culture of a given place. So he was speaking of the literature of Europe and not just pertaining to the writers of Britain or America. He was revolting against that attitude of not seeking outside their individual country. So when it comes to literature, it was not about English literature alone, but European literature. To get to know European literature, one has to have an understanding of the A to Z of Europe, its culture, its tradition, its literature, starting from Homer to the very present day, the very present day. So according to T.S. Eliot, if you are an English student and you are to have a thorough understanding of English literature, England or English and England being a part of Europe, earlier it was a part of Europe, meaning even now it is a part of Europe. I mean, English literature was pertaining to Europe. Now you can't say that also. Now it's worldwide. So to understand English literature, you have to have an A to Z of both European English literature or the European literature as such, not English literature alone, European literature as such, its culture right from the Greco-Roman period to the very present day. To the very present day, in the sense, the very now, the authors that we have today. Okay, to the very moment. And we should have a thorough understanding. That's what he says. It's not just to be a critic, it's not an easy thing. To understand literature is not an easy thing. You have to have a very vast understanding of everything about literature, about Europe. So since as I was saying, T.S. Eliot being writing at that time and being in Europe, he was speaking about the Western tradition. Next, he says that he does not believe in the slavish imitation of tradition. I told you in the beginning. In fact, tradition is not inherited, you learn from tradition. Just because you are born in a specific culture does not mean you inherit the tradition of the culture of that particular country, or you inherit the tradition of that literature. No, it is not like that. We are Indians, right? But if you think that it was inherited, if tradition was inherited, we should have had a good understanding of our tradition, our literature, but most of us don't, do we? So then, so how do we get it? We learn it, we acquire it. We may know more about English literature than perhaps Malayalam literature. Why? Because we are specializing on it, we are reading it, and thus we get to know the tradition or the culture of English literature and Europe. But Eliot says it is not enough. English literature, that is just getting the tradition of culture or tradition and culture of English literature is not enough. He says that in order to understand English literature, which is a part of European literature, we have to have an understanding of European literature, the A to Z of culture, its tradition, and it is acquired, it is learned through hard work and patience. It is not inherited. So tradition is not inherited. That is to say, the poet or the writer must have a knowledge of all the great writers of that tradition. So in that context of England or America, he says that it is not just limited to national border. That's what we discussed in the beginning. Two issues, national and racial issue, because the British were not ready to go for, or they did not believe in the allegiance to outside, anything outside after the Romantic period. They wanted liberty in full way. So here he says it is not just limited to national border. The writer talks about Western tradition, be it UK or US or Russian or Canadian. They all talk about European culture. They all talk about English literature, the Western tradition, the European tradition, the European literature. So they have to be an English student, you have to have an understanding of Homer, the classical Greek, Roman, Italian writers to the present day writers all around Europe, and of course now it cannot be concentrated now that is not when T.S. Eliot was writing. Now it cannot be concentrated in Europe. You have to have an understanding of even our latest writers, the latest writers in India, the English writers in India, from India. Okay? The whole European tradition must be understood by the ones who are studying or learning English, or say learning literature. Okay. Since Eliot was speaking from European point of view, it is European tradition, Western tradition. Then he says that tradition is not a past thing. It is a continuous and even present, and it is even in the present. It is still in the present. It is not dead, but it is something that is already living. That is why that is why he emphasizes on the historical sense. So what tradition is over? Tradition is the A to Z of a culture. And since Eliot is speaking about literature, it is an A to Z understanding of European tradition, A to Z understanding of Western tradition. Since Eliot is speaking from the European point of view, he is Eurocentric. So a writer or a poet must, or even a critic must have a thorough understanding of the literature of the Western literature, or must have a thorough understanding of the culture, the tradition of Europe or the Western countries. Eliot says that it is not the pastness of the past that is important, but the presentness of the past today that is important. That is the historical sense that he is speaking about. Next, after tradition, he comes to historical sense, because only a person with a historical sense will be able to appreciate tradition. And he speaks about his historical sense. Now, what is his historical sense? His historical sense is that he says that it is not the pastness of the past that is important. It's not about the past that is important. How the past writers were important in the were important. It is about how they are present in us even today that is important. So, in the historical sense, how tradition lives in the present is more important. For example, in the Indian context, when we talk about Rama or Krishna, it is not the pastness of Rama or Krishna, the story of Rama or Krishna, the pastness of Rama or Krishna that is important, but how Rama and Krishna are alive in us, how their values are ingrained in us and are still having its ability to move us. Our ability, our perception of life as based on these legends, our attitude and how they shape our life today is more important. It's not just the history of Rama or Krishna that is important. And if it is the Christians, the qualities of Christ, it's not about who Christ was and his past that is important, but how Christ is alive in us that is more important. The qualities of Prophet Muhammad and how it functions in us, which is more important. So it makes, that is what that makes tradition. It is not the pastness or their story that is important. So how the past is alive in us to this very day, that counts. So when it comes to literature, how the past traditions of European literature, Western literature is alive in us. Our knowledge of the Greco-Roman literature, how the various conventions of literature that was given to us by the classicists is still counted, is still used by the writers, and how it works, that matters. For example, Aristotle's tragedy, how his concept of tragedy and how that concept works even today. If I want to write a tragedy, I will have to have a thorough understanding of Aristotle's tragedy, and then I will work on it. And not just Aristotle, but also various others, my predecessors, and then look at how they have written it, how they are differing, or how they are similar and dissimilar, and then I would work on it. So it is not about Aristotle's tragedy as that of the past, but how Aristotle's tragedy is able to help me today to write a tragic novel or a tragic play that counts. Okay? And that can happen only if I have the historical sense. Okay, but Eliot does not mean pedantic knowledge. When he says about knowledge, he does not mean a quick, fussy, nitpicky, superficial knowledge. He means consciousness of the past. And some persons have a greater sensitivity to historical awareness. As Eliot states, to quote him, quote, "Some can absorb knowledge, the more tardy must sweat for it." Some are able to absorb knowledge, whereas some, the more tardy, must sweat for it. Shakespeare acquired more essential history from Plutarch than most men could from the whole of British Museum. Okay, so you have to have that ability to absorb nature. You have to have that historical sense. You have to have greater sensitivity. So if Shakespeare could write his historical plays, then the reason as to why he could write it so beautifully was because he read and understood Plutarch, the histories from Plutarch. Okay, Plutarch's historical essays, and that helped him shape his historical plays. So throughout Eliot's poetry and criticism, we find this emphasis on the artist surrounding himself to a larger authority, giving oneself to larger authority. So just the opposite of romanticism, the classicism which owed allegiance to outside. Then he also says that it is timeless. He speaks about timelessness. Tradition is timeless. The historical sense, the tradition is timeless, meaning it has no past, no present. And it is temporal, that means it exists today. So it is timeless. Tradition is timeless. There is no past, nothing to do with the past, nothing to do with the present, nothing to do with it is temporal, meaning it exists even to the very day. So what is tradition? Tradition therefore is the pastness of the past. It is both the past, the pastness of the past, the historical sense. The pastness of the past, it is both the past and the present, and it is timeless and temporal. That is, the entire literature written up to this time from the past, the existing order, that there is an order, okay, there is an order right from the beginning up to now. And this exists, this structure of writing in literature, how it is followed from the past to the very present. It is a literature from Homer to the present. So what is tradition? Tradition is the entire literature right up to this moment or till a new person starts writing, starts his work of art, that is up to the present moment, right from Homer to say what is today's date, whatever date is today, 2021, you have this is the year 2021 up to now, when a new writer is born and a new work is born. So up to that we have tradition. So we will stop here and we'll continue in the next class. So thank you and keep safe.